What was that?
1, 2, 3.
Speaking it normally? Or is that us?
Speaking normally.
Okay. She's going to come and adjust it.
Yay. Adjusting.
How's this one? Hello? 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 Hello?
Hello. Mine works.
Silence. Voice.
Well, that's the best news I've had all day.
Okay. That's the sort of support. She's coming back.
Hello? Hello? Oh, that's better. Is that better?
Sure, if you want to go first, just point at this.
You guys hear this? More?
Where are you doing it?
What now?
I'm going to do it where it's pointed.
Oh, okay. Oh, so I need you.
Is that better? More? Better? Good? Okay.
Good evening. My name is Chase Thomas, and I'm the Executive Director of the ABU Education Fund and our affiliated organization, the Alliance for Better Utah. We welcome all of you here tonight for this House District 8 debate. The ABU Education Fund is a nonpartisan 501c3 organization dedicated to civic engagement and good governance. We see the debate process as an opportunity to work towards increasing civic engagement, and we are pleased to be doing so here tonight. We're pleased to be partnering with the John R. Park Debate Society from the University of Utah, as well as the League of Women Voters of Utah, for this debate series this year. In addition to legislative debates, our past debates have included municipal debates and school board debates, and also includes last year's special election for Congressional District 3. Our debates are designed to engage the public in their local elections by providing candidates with the opportunity to talk directly to their voters, and giving voters a chance to interact with the politicians who have the greatest impact on their day-to-day lives. We believe that the success of our debate program was best summed up by a member of our audience 2 years ago when she remarked, "I came with an open mind and I left with a lawn sign." We hope that some of you will perhaps feel the same way when you leave here tonight. Our debate series partner, the John R. Park Debate Society, was founded in 1869, has hosted more than 30 campaign debates and issue forums over the last decade, featuring community organizations ranging from Utah Minutemen to the American Civil Liberties Union, and political figures ranging from Governor Gary Herbert to former Salt Lake City Mayor Rocky Anderson. They are recognized as the 2016 University of Utah Beacon of Excellence and the winner of the 2017 National Parliamentary Debate Association National Championship. The director of the Debate Society and tonight's debate moderator is Michael Middleton. In addition to being the Debate Society's director, Michael is assistant professor of argumentation and public discourse in the Department of Communication at the University of Utah and has over 20 years of experience in competitive debate and argumentation pedagogy. We'd like to thank our candidates for being here today. Thank you. And also to all of you for being here. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Michael Middleton.
Thank you. I'm Mike Middleton, and I'm the director of the John R. Park Debate Society at the University of Utah. I will be your moderator for tonight's debate. Look forward to facilitating a conversation between the two candidates with us tonight who are vying to represent House District 8 in this November's upcoming elections. Before I introduce the format of tonight's debate, please join me in thanking Chase Thomas and the ABU Education Fund for organizing this evening's event. Tonight's debate will be organized in 3 parts. The candidates will each have 3 minutes to introduce themselves. Following that, we'll engage in a moderated discussion, during which time each candidate will have an opportunity to answer each question. Their answers will be limited to 2 minutes each. The issues the candidates will discuss during this portion of the debate were drawn from issues suggested by each candidate. But members of the used John R. Park Debate Society wrote the final questions, and neither candidate has had the opportunity to preview those questions. During this portion of the discussion, I reserve the right to ask follow-up questions or offer a rebuttal to any candidate, and I'll have 1 minute to respond. If you think you need a rebuttal and I don't offer to you, let me know, and if we have time, we'll fit it in. Finally, each candidate will have 3 minutes to offer closing remarks. The order of introductions, questions, and closing statements has been predetermined by drawing numbers, and there's a timekeeper who's right here on the front row who will be giving time signals to both candidates. Before the debate begins, please join me in turning off your cell phones, pagers, tablets, and other devices that might interfere with tonight's conversation. Additionally, I would ask that you not interrupt the debate while it's occurring, except for right now, when I hope you'll join me in welcoming the candidates participating in the election to represent House District 8, Republican Steve Waldrip and Democrat Deana Froerer. And with that, Ms. Froerer, the floor is yours for a 3-minute introduction.
Thank you very much. So this evening, I want to thank each of you for being here in this era of Hulu and Netflix and baseball playoffs. I really appreciate that you're engaging in your civic duty here today, and civic engagement is part of your life. For me, when I got this invite, I was surprised. It's like, really? You want to have us debate? And I thought, what could be up about that? It's pretty unusual, but I think I understand why. And I can tell you when I go door to door in this campaign, the thing that's important to me is to let them know where I'm coming from, and I usually say, hi, I'm Deana Froerer, running for Utah House, and I've taught 25 years at Weber State. In 10 years, I've been teaching financial literacy. And that is the heart of me. I'm a teacher. I was called to do that, but I'm much more than that. I was built on a career path that before I was a teacher, I was vice president and regional economist for Key Corp. And prior to that, I started a company with a gentleman named Dick Pratt, who was the former chairman of the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation. Prior to that, I did my MBA at the University of Utah, and I worked with Thane Robson. So many of you might remember I worked with the Bureau of Economic and Business Research and learned all Utah economics from. He was considered to me the father of Utah economic thought. Prior to that, I was a U.S. Fulbright Scholar to Hungary, and I was there as the Berlin Wall went down. I was with the Federal Reserve prior to that, working in economic research, and all of that was based on a university degree from Washburn in Topeka, Kansas. And in that time, I studied abroad at the University of Copenhagen. And all those opportunities came out of growing up on a farm in the middle of nowhere in Kansas, the youngest of 8, where I learned that when things go bad, and you're out there in the middle of nowhere, and it doesn't seem like there's a solution. You got to find people, you got to work together, whether they're friend or foe, and you can find a solution. So that's been my life. That's what I've been working on. And I think that makes me a very viable candidate, whereas my opponent here, he also brings everything to the table. It's amazing. So he has the money. He's able to put in $10,000 up front. He has the machine as a part of the executive committee of the Weber County Republicans. And he also has what we call the monarchy, right? That my brother-in-law has endorsed him and said that this is the person to pass on the legacy. And I appreciate that, but I believe many in Utah are at the point where that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for someone who can find common ground. We're looking for someone who will speak for ordinary people. And we're looking for someone who has the background to understand that to have an economy that works for everyone, we need education that works for everyone. And we're back to me being a teacher. So I thank you for being here this evening. I look forward to this opportunity to share our thoughts. And please know, the thing I bring the most are a set of ears for deep listening and a heart for people. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Am I off again? You guys hear this okay? Got even another mic.
It's working.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody being here as well. Thank you to Michael and the John R. Park Debate Society and Chase and the ABU Education Fund and your team for putting this together. You've created a great event. The turnout here is fantastic. Thank you for taking time out of your schedules. And again, baseball playoffs are on, and it's tough to leave that behind for some of us. But we appreciate you taking time to be here tonight to listen to the issues, to look at the candidates, to evaluate who will best represent this district, who will create solutions that will work for the citizens of this district. My background is similar, I think, in many respects to Ms. Froerer's. I went to BYU, went to the University of Utah, got a law degree. University of Washington, got a master's in tax law. So my background is in law. I practiced law for 9 months, decided that wasn't the life for me. I took a job with the Froerer company here in Ogden. I worked on the Business Depot Ogden project for 14 years. During that 14-year period, we had amazing success. We had a great team. We brought 4,000 jobs into Ogden. We brought $500 million of private investment into Ogden. I negotiated $250 million of lease agreements in that period of time. My job, in short, was to take all of these disparate viewpoints, all of these different things, and create a solution. And that solution generally ended up with a company locating here, bringing employees, bringing workforce, bringing investment, and creating value. So that's what I bring to this office and to this race, is the opportunity for me to create value in the same way that I did when I was with the Froerer company. About 5 years ago, I decided it was time to hang up my spurs at the Froerer company and be a little less busy. I went into doing some real estate consulting and spent more time with my family, and also went into doing more community service. I serve on the United Way of Northern Utah Board. I serve on the Ogden Valley Planning Commission. I've been involved in the Ogden Valley Parks District. I'm on the Ogden Valley Land Trust Board, on the Pineview Advisory Committee. I'm involved in the community. What this race is about, and what tonight is about, is two things. Number one is the issues. You have to see if both of these candidates reflect your values, reflect your issues, understand who you are and what you need. I think that I do. The other part of the debate tonight will focus on who can get things done. Now, Ms. Froerer has already indicated that I'm a member of the Republican Party, the establishment. There's benefits to that. I will be in the room where the decisions happen. There is an advantage to our constituency having me in that room, a significant advantage. When you're in the room where it happens, when you're at the table where things happen, you can make decisions, you can create value. And that's what I bring to this race, is the creation of value for our district. That's my legacy, and that's what I hope to bring to you in District 8. Thank you.
Thank you both. So I think we're going to have you share Ms. Froerer's microphone, if that one seems so. If you want to turn that one off, and then we'll just use the one. The first topic we're going to talk about is economic development. It was one that both of you were enthusiastic about discussing, so we'll start there. And Mr. Waldrip, you'll have the first opportunity to respond. This summer, KSL reported that while Utah continues to add jobs to its economy at rates that lead the nation, wages are lagging significantly behind, and the latest Utah economic report to the governor predicts continued lagging wage growth. In fact, nearly 30 states have a minimum wage higher than Utah's. Wages are so low that one analysis found that a minimum wage worker in some parts of the state would have to work 76 hours per week to afford a one-bedroom apartment. However, this past session, the legislature rejected bills attempting to increase the minimum wage to $12 per hour. If elected, what policies, including minimum wage revisions or incentives to employers, would you encourage your legislative colleagues to consider to address Utah's lagging wage growth? Mr. Waldrop.
Thank you, Michael, for that question. I think that's an important question because we are in the middle of an incredible economic expansion. Utah is one of the best managed states in the nation. We all know this. We balance our budget. We pay our bills. We don't have a deficit. We do a good job. Wage growth is a challenging thing because, frankly, we have to let the free markets do their job. Now, we've just seen in the last couple of days, Amazon just raised their wages to $15 an hour. It harkens back to when Henry Ford raised his wages and doubled them from $2.25 a day to $5 a day. Free market took care of what it needed to take care of. I don't believe that increasing government regulation will solve the wage problem. I don't think that creating an artificial minimum wage is directly the way to do it. I think that we need to allow the free market to operate the way it has for many years. Wages catch up. They always do. They always have. We cannot leave our poorest behind. We have to create value, and by stimulating economic growth, by continuing with the record unemployment, low unemployment that we have in this state, wage pressure goes up. We just saw it with Amazon. It happens because employers know that they have to keep the best and brightest, and the way to keep the best and brightest is to pay them more. This is what happens. It's happened time and time and time again. History has proven that that is the best way to encourage economic growth. If we artificially regulate these things, there is the high likelihood that there's a backlash that comes off of that. And that backlash is economic contraction, which we cannot afford in our state. It's a tough one because we all want to pay people more, but we also need to respect the free market. That is what has created what we have today. We don't want to kill that. We want to allow the free market to do what it's always done. Thank you.
Ms. Froerer.
The question was, what are we going to do about it? And I think we have to go back to where the real problem is coming from. So when they talk of economic development and wage growth, and that it will all solve itself through the market, they miss an important thing. It's like talking about the sprinkles on the ice cream. Oh, it's going to be so good. And yet you've got to have the ice cream. Where did the ice cream come from? So when we're talking about economic development, we're talking about education, to be honest. In this state, what we have is a mismatch. We have a mismatch between the education that we think should be funded and pushed ahead and the needs of the job market. So this mismatch is leading to the wage question that we have here tonight. Why are fewer people being paid a living wage? Does it take 76 hours a week to afford a one-bedroom apartment? Who can work 76 hours? Well, I'll tell you, a lot of people are doing that right now. And we're hoping for this to solve itself through the market. But rather, we have to realign our education system to meet the needs of the employers. So jobs don't come to Utah. We talk about economic development. In many cases, because we don't have the workforce. We have 30,000 unfilled jobs right now. Yes, we have a very low unemployment rate. That is not good news if the fact is that we have a lot of jobs we cannot fill because we don't have the workforce to do it. So we've got to think a much bigger picture than it'll take care of itself if we just let the economy tick through and by. It'll be fine. No, we've got to align our education to the needs of the workforce. And that's something I passionately understand and work with every day with high school seniors and in an Econ 1010, that's an entry-level class, day in and day out, trying to help students understand that an employer doesn't want to know just what's your degree, what do you know? They want to know what can you do well. We must have skills development just as equally important as knowledge. It's knowledge, right? Your education, plus the skills you bring to the workforce that will get you those jobs and fill those 30,000 jobs. And it's not just going to magically happen in the market. Thank you.
Ms. Froerer, I want to follow up on your question just briefly. And I hear the part of your answer where you're saying that better education will produce workers that can fetch higher wages. But I want to ask you to comment specifically on the question that focused on would you support an increase in the minimum wage or other incentives to employers to address lagging wage growth in the short term?
In terms of other incentives, I think that's what we have to open our minds to. Another incentive is that the education and training we need, if you take one course out of Weber State, it's $1,300 to take one 3-hour course. It gets so expensive that in each credit hour of the jobs we need, let's say that what the tech college is producing, a lot of people can't afford it, but yet the job market says we need it. We've got to align where we channel our education funding. We've got to align and make it affordable for young people to get the skills and training they need. And we've got to encourage people to understand that at the end of the day, it's not going to solve itself. And yes, we have to find ways to help people get the training that meets the needs of the job market.
Mr. Waldrip, do you want to respond briefly?
Thank you. And I think what you just heard is something very critical from an economist that understands this. Artificial incentives, artificial burdens do not work in the labor market. We can incentivize good behavior, but by punishing it or trying to regulate, over-regulate, it actually contracts the economy. Education is critical. Education is what we're really here for tonight. That is the number one thing that is going to create a difference in the future of our economy, in the future of our state, in the future of our children. We have issues here in Harrisville with some crime and theft that have gone on recently. Boils down to education. If we do not educate our children, starting at the beginning, by 3rd grade, if they're not reading at grade level, that is the determiner of our future prison population. So our investment needs to start young. We pay pennies now, or we pay dollars later.
Our next question also focuses on the economy. As has been widely reported, Utah's planned inland port has been fraught with disagreements between Governor Herbert and the city of Salt Lake over land use, taxation, as well as broader concerns about transparency and accountability of the port's governing body. If elected, what's your position on the inland port, and how do you think the legislature can, or how would you advocate the legislature should act to maximize the benefits of that planned inland port for northern Utah and address concerns held by various stakeholders? Ms. Froerer.
There's two elements here. So the inland port has been a point of controversy because we have a supermajority legislature which stands with the power to make these sort of decisions. And if you haven't heard about Greg Hughes and his role in having adjacent land to the port and being very much in favor of it, but also then having a self-interest in its success for his own personal gain, it's understandable that people find that offensive because we send people to elect to represent us. So in that respect, that's a question of ethics in government. And when you have absolute power of a supermajority, absolute power corrupts. Now, on the other side of it, the inland port has great value economically if it does create opportunities for Utahns to have a job and employment and an expanding global reach for our Utah businesses. So it has validity. There's a third question as to its location and the motivations of the people in moving the prison out to that area and then the inland port and all these things of people and their what's their other gain besides what we're trying to do politically. Now for Weber County, that would of course perhaps open up jobs. Do I think that's a high priority to the people making the decisions? I don't think so, right? That's like, oh, let's hope this gives some jobs to Weber County. I guess it's possible they think that. I would hope as a representative, my goal would be to make sure that the work that happens there is the work that does benefit my constituents, that it has some hope for ordinary people, and that what happens there creates jobs for Utah families, because that's where we are right now, trying to make sure we have a place where people can live, raise their families, and make a go of it. So, thank you.
Mr. Waldrip.
Thank you, Michael. VDO, what used to be the DDO, is basically Inland Port 1.0. This is now Inland Port 2.0. VDO was a 1,400-acre wasteland when the federal government left. There were 200 jobs out there. And you go out there today, there are 7,500 jobs. Nearly $1 billion in private investment. The VDO development is funding generally everything that's happening good in downtown Ogden. It's created jobs. The inland port, I think, will do the same thing. A rising tide lifts all ships, particularly in economic development. When you have a place like the inland port, it attracts looks. When those looks come in, the company now looks for the secondary factors. First factor is, okay, do we have something? Can we go there? Can we create a business there? Now, what are the other options? The other thing that happens when you have a job creation engine like that is you will have significant spin-off activity. Again, we've seen it out at Hill Air Force Base, we've seen it at BDO. A rising tide lifts all ships. So I do support the Inland Port Initiative. Hopefully it's managed well. Generally speaking, government needs to be open, accountable, and transparent. Those three things, open, accountable, and transparent. Now that does not mean that every meeting and every decision has to be talked about in a public hearing, because that can serve as an impediment to progress. However, there are always considerations. When you have a board of that size, there are laws that we have, open meeting laws, that have to be respected and observed. And that is what I hope comes out of these inland port discussions. And I think there's a good bright light shining on that right now, which I hope produces the desired effect. But yes, the inland port is critical for Utah, and it will create jobs in Weber County, I guarantee it.
All right, we're going to continue with the theme of economics, but talk for a moment about housing affordability. Earlier this month, an editorial in the Deseret News noted that Utah has experienced the fourth highest increase in home prices of any state in the last 15 to 20 years. Reinforcing this rise in the cost of housing, in many communities throughout Utah, a gap exists between growth in income and housing prices. In Weber County, for example, the Standard Examiner reports that the median home value will increase by 10% this year, or nearly more than double the state's average wage growth of 5.3%. What policies would you support to help address the growing challenge to sustained economic development that housing affordability presents? Mr. Waldrip.
Thank you, Mike. This is another critical issue. We're almost in crisis mode with affordable housing, with housing in general in the state of Utah. Over the last 10 years, we have attracted 50,000 more households than we provided homes for. So the result of this is what we just heard described. We have rising home prices, rising rents, a decrease in home affordability. There are several initiatives in place designed to handle it. There's the Salt Lake Chamber-backed Housing Gap Coalitions going around to different cities and talking about how do you tackle this within each city. It's going to have to be a locally driven solution, but the cities are going to have to realize that they're going to have to create additional density within their core in order to handle this. Now, there are side benefits to creating additional density with air quality, which we'll talk about, I think, a little bit later. With transportation infrastructure, there's some benefits to doing increased density. But we have to get past the thought of not in my backyard. We don't want this density here. This is going to be critical for the next 10 years, or else we're going to get further and further behind. Our housing prices are going to continue to go up. Now, personally, I, with a couple of partners, started a little enterprise called the Rocky Mountain Homes Fund to help with this issue. It's a social benefit fund designed to provide a pathway to home ownership for those who are in a rental situation, but by all rights should have a home that they own. They're earning enough money, they're typically a line worker out of BDO, and they should be a homeowner, but they don't understand the process. So partnering with United Way and some other good partners, Cottage of Hope and AAA Fair Credit, we've had some success. We've had 2 families graduate from this program and become homeowners. We are meeting with Weber State, who is working on this right now, and this is a critical piece of a new alliance that's happening in northern Utah. And we're hopeful that this program will expand and help to tackle this important issue.
Thank you, Ms. Froerer.
This is an absolute key issue when I've gone door to door. So I have young people in this state who say we can't afford to live here. I knock on doors and you'll get data about who might answer. You're going to have a 67-year-old and a 27-year-old. You're going to have an 83-year-old and their 22-year-old niece or nephew or grandchild. There are so many people trying to, what we would say, find some way at affordable housing, right? So it's out of the existing housing that it's happening in many, many cases. And we ignore that when we talk about affordable housing. We obviously have a great concern, but we do a lot of emphasis on those who are homeless. And we have the very low income. And there's a very small pool available for the number of people in the state that could qualify very low income. And as we move up the bracket, yeah, it looks pretty bad. But what's really going on is that for most people, seniors and especially young people starting out, affordable housing is already an issue for them. And they're not on our radar, generally speaking. And I really appreciate that my opponent says, let's get past the resistance to NIMBY, not in my backyard. But on the flip side, let's look at the money. The reality is that Steve has taken in 20% of his money. He's raised $10,000 more than me, and 20% of that came from realtors, the Utah Association of Realtors, the home builders, right? These are pieces that love to build homes and make their money off of new construction. And as a developer himself, he works in Ogden Valley, and yes, he's been on these boards, but it's often because he's tied into the people who develop that land, not the people who are concerned about maybe something so exotic as inclusionary zoning, where we might say, yeah, you can make that new development of cool stuff, but make sure you set aside something for the poor, right, for the affordable housing element. Fighting for inclusionary type zoning, things like that. He's got the heart for it. Unfortunately, he's involved in the money, the machine. And what's the other piece? The monarchy, right? The real estate world. And that's where they come from, and that's what they're about. And I know Steve would like to do a good job. And I'd like to help him when I get elected. But the reality is he's not in a very good position. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Waldrip alluded to the effect that population growth is having on...
Michael, I think I probably need to respond to that.
Okay.
Probably not a surprise to you. I think it's critical to understand a couple of things. I've spent my career in the private sector. This is where I've lived. These are good people. These are the people that buy groceries and cars and make our economy go. They support me because they know I understand the critical nature of private enterprise in our economy. They know that I understand how things get done. They understand that. They know that I get that. They also know, like, for instance, the chair of the Ogden Valley Planning Commission, who's a staunch Democrat, and supports me because she knows I get it. I get the common folk. I'm one of you. These are our issues. These aren't my issues or her issues or your issues. These are our issues. And we will work together, and I am the guy that will go down there, have a seat at the table, and work on our issues, fight for our community, and represent all of us.
And I'm going to give you all equal time on this question, so I'll give 1 minute to Ms. Froerer, and then we'll move on to the next question.
I appreciate that, but I'm okay. Thanks.
Great. You get to go first on this question anyhow. So, Mr. Waldrip was referring to population growth as one of the factors driving the lack of affordable housing in Utah. And this summer, the Governor's Office of Management and Budget identified population growth as both Utah's biggest challenge and one of its biggest opportunities moving forward. Outside of your discussion of housing affordability, what policies would you support to help maximize the opportunities and overcome the challenges of Utah's rapidly growing and changing population? Ms. Froerer.
I spend my life every day in front of large numbers of people in classrooms, mostly young, but in a college classroom they can be of all ages. And there's nothing that I'm more passionate about that I live my life for is to raise each person I meet or work with or teach to the best version of themselves. So in this idea of population growth, I see humanity as an incredibly wonderful thing that we have to respect, love, and nurture. So when you want to ask, what are we going to do to help in Utah? We win in the nation, right? The highest percentage of that school-age population, aged 5 to 17, we've got the highest percentage in the nation already. You're asking about another 50,000 coming in to visit? Wow! Where do we start? Well, we start with recognizing that over the course of history, you can't expect to house all those people, and you can't expect to do it in this way we did it before, right? We can't all spread out. So as Steve has talked about there, we have to do some higher density housing. We've got to think that that's not a bad idea. We've got to take education to a new level. We can't assume, and we shouldn't, there's 237 different languages spoken at the second grade level in the state. So when we talk about inclusion and how you bring people in, you've got to recognize what a difficult and huge challenge we're taking in a state where we've always thought, hey, everybody's pretty much like me. That's not the case. The demographics are shifting drastically. We need people that can have that heart and that soul when they step into a debate about an issue, and they're not driven by moneyed interest, and they're not driven by special interest, but they're driven by the interest of humanity to speak up. So I feel greatly both scared and excited and hopeful that this is a state that can welcome people like it always has and will. But there's many, many challenges in terms of discrimination. There's many challenges in terms of non-inclusion. And if you want the economy to work, you've got to take those barriers away. It's a big picture thing, but I get it.
Thank you.
I think it matters.
Mr. Waldrop.
Thank you, Michael. It's a critical issue, and it goes along with the housing discussion we've had. It goes more, I think, than anything to the education discussion. Our opportunities and our children's opportunities are going to be driven by their ability to get a good education, a quality education. That's what's bringing people here, is all of these opportunities. We invest in our children by investing in our teachers. That is number one. So when we talk about population growth, how are we going to provide for them? We provide for them by providing them the best education that we can. It's number one or two on everybody's list I talk to as I'm learning outdoors. Education, education, education. We can do better. We can create a system where our teachers are more fairly compensated so that we can attract, train, and retain the best teachers. This is proven to be the number one thing that we can do. You can do two things to improve education. Number one, you can have better families. Now, we can't legislate that. Sometimes we try, but we do a bad job. We cannot legislate that. But number two, and the only thing we can really do, is invest in teachers. That is the only thing that makes a measurable difference in a child's education. So when we talk about the future population growth, and how do we address that? How do we create opportunities? We get good teachers. We train them and we retain them. We get teachers like Deana, who care and are passionate and are good. And they light our children up. And then we get these kids that come up that otherwise wouldn't have a chance. And now, all of a sudden, they get their fire lit by third grade, and they're reading, and they're growing, and they get these incredible educators. We've all had them. You remember them from when you were a kid, right? Your favorite teacher. They lit your fire. We need more. We need better, and we need to train them and retain them. We're in a teacher crisis right now in the state because we're not doing that. And that is something that I will do as your legislator.
education is where we're going next. The Salt Lake Tribune reported in March that following the compromises between the legislature and the efforts made by the Our Schools Now initiative, some were hailing 2018 as the year of education in Utah. However, even if the projection that these compromises will add $845 in per pupil spending per year proved to be true, that still leaves Utah in the bottom 10% of states in annual per pupil education funding. And the NAEA reports that Utah's average starting teacher salary is about $3,000 less than the national average. All of this is to say that this year's victories are only a part of the effort to improve Utah's public education system. What policies or reforms do you think are still needed to achieve Utah's best educational outcomes? Mr. Waldrip, I believe you're first on this question.
Thank you. I'll keep going with what I was just talking about. There are two things: families and teachers. We cannot legislate families, but we can get better and retain better teachers. We have a teacher crisis right now. The governor just put out a call. Please come back to teaching. Our teachers are paid at substandard wages. They're not paid what they ought to be paid. There's three things as I talk to teachers that they want. They want respect. They want support in the classroom. They don't want to be buying supplies out of their own pocket. And then they want fair pay. I think this says a lot about the quality of teachers we already have. But we need to do a better job. We have room for improvement. My baseline is to double teacher salaries. I think that's where we ought to start. Now, I'd be okay if we raised them by 50%. I'm okay with that. Because what that will do is that will create a change that will last for generations in our education system. Will last for generations. So if you remember one thing from tonight, remember that we invest in our children by investing in our teachers. And that is, this tax raise will help. It's a little bit of money. It will not create the change that we need to see in our education system. We've proven that over and over again. We've thrown a little bit of money here, a little bit of money there. We fiddle around the edges. We have to go to data-driven solutions. And that data in every study points to teachers. And so that's where our focus needs to be in education. We need to live there. We need to talk about it. We need to advocate for it. And again, I will be the one that will be in the room and at the table when those decisions are made. And when that funding decision is made, I will be there advocating for our teachers. Thank you.
Ms. Froerer.
If there's ever been a moment when I wanted to say, nothing about us without us, that is my motto when it comes to education. Nothing about us without us. He's talking about, once again, how they'll go in that secret room and they'll figure out all these cool things about us. But I have been giving my life to education. I teach teachers to teach. Besides what I told you about economics and teaching that, I'm in charge of your professional development. And I work with a book called, for example, a book called Helping Children Succeed, What Works and Why, and dealing with the adverse childhood experiences that our students walk into the door with and how to address that. I work with another book called Visible Learning with Hattie. And in our school, our students evaluate our teachers. And we make our decisions about how to improve our education in terms of student engagement, in terms of methods of teaching, in terms of linking our topic to the real world. We measure that, and we improve it. And we have a school with 400 people on the waiting list because we are devoted to figuring out new and better ways to teach that don't involve money, to be honest. What has happened in Utah is we had wonderful people go off to teach, and they did it because it fit their lives. It had an intrinsic reward. You had a schedule that fit the life of your child. You had the summers off. And what have we done? We have pushed teachers to run it like a business. We need you to work after school. We need you to go to school this summer. We need you to take this test. And what the teachers want, when he says respect, they want to have that power in the classroom given back, where they're not told, read this many minutes per day. That's what they want. They want to be held accountable. They're okay with that. They're fine with accountability. But we need local control. We need to allow teachers and great administrators, and to find great administrators and raise them up so that we have schools that are thriving, searching, finding the best ways and best practices, and then we try to translate, share, and build other schools up. And that's what's going on. I'm living it right now. And that's not about the money. It's about the heart of teachers getting to be the teacher they want to be. And not people in closed rooms saying, oh, we got this plan. Do it. Thank you.
So I want to follow up on this because both of you have, in addition to talking about teacher pay, mentioned the notion of respect for teachers or teachers feeling respected. One of the ways that Utah has attempted to address its teacher shortage is through alternative licensing systems that allow individuals to teach without any professional training and education, but rather content area expertise. Do you think that you can help support respect for teachers and maintain programs that allow people to work in the classroom without the sort of training that teachers typically receive? And Mr. Waldrip, will let you go ahead and take the first go of this question.
Thank you. I'll answer that question very shortly. I have no idea. I'm not a teacher. I don't purport to be a teacher. I'm not an administrator. I don't need to know this. My job as a legislator is to have the people that understand these things, people like Deana, come to me and say, this is what we need to be successful. I don't want to tell an elevator inspector how to inspect an elevator. I want him to come to me and say, this is what I need to do my job effectively. My job as a legislator is to provide them with the tools and the resources to effectively accomplish their job. We have a neighbor that works for the Highway Patrol. I went to him and I said, what are the 10 dumbest laws that you have to enforce, or 10 dumbest rules that you have to abide by? That's where I want to hear from. I want to hear from those who are on the front lines that are living with these things. They tell me what to do. My job as a legislator is to listen and provide them the support and resources to do their job effectively. Thank you.
Ms. Froerer, would you like to address that question?
Repeat the question, please.
Do you support, you're both referring to respect for teachers as a profession. Do you support the continuing use of alternative routes to licensing that allow teachers into the classroom who haven't had professional training and education?
In terms of the ARL, as it's commonly called, alternative routes to licensure, it's built on the premise that if a person has content knowledge, they can make a good teacher. Now, that is not necessarily true. In the world, there's a lot of realities, right? And some people can learn a lot of things, but they don't go off, and if you go off ARL, you don't, when you start out, have what we call pedagogy. You haven't been taught how to teach yet. So there's a transition there. In some cases it works, and sometimes it does not. And you need that local control, that ability to work with that and adapt to that, and maybe put mentors with that person and bring them along, but it's driven out of a teacher shortage. It's driven out of a situation where we just simply don't have enough teachers and people willing to step up to be teachers and young people training to be teachers. So I think it's a necessary move. I think it can be managed. I do think it has worked. Where I teach, we have a lot of ARL that successfully transition to being excellent teachers, but it does take support and it does take some kind of path, and especially mentoring of someone who understands and can help that person become a better teacher.
All right, we're going to turn our attention now to healthcare. And the primary issue on the minds of a lot of voters this fall, as they think about healthcare, is the proposed Medicaid expansion ballot initiative. That voter initiative promises to cover about twice the 70,000 people who gained coverage under HB 472, the legislative plan passed earlier this year, at a cost of $77 million per year versus the legislature's $30 million. The proposal is funded by a 0.15% increase in the sales tax. Republican lawmakers, however, warn that the proposal could be a potential budget buster, especially if federal support wavered during economic downturns. Do you support the ballot initiative to enact a full expansion of Medicaid? If so, how would you answer the criticism levied by Governor Herbert and GOP members of the state legislature that the proposal is fiscally irresponsible? Ms. Froerer.
Well, your key question there is, do I support the expansion of Medicaid? And the answer is not only yes, but heck yes. So in this state, we put money behind us over and over, saying to the federal government, oh, in fear of you're sending the money, we will come up short. That's penny wise and pound foolish, because there's a social impact calculator that you can put to the fact that in this economy we have people without health care, and that means they're not able to work, or that means that their person can't provide the health care for their child, and they're, once again, not able to work, or the stresses, or the financial stresses that come when they do have to have health care and they can't afford it. So we like to ignore that social impact calculator number, which is very, very real when you don't make health care available to your people. Here in Utah, we seem to value it to a point. So with HB 742, or 472, sorry, let me get that right, it's awaiting federal approval. Because, for instance, with federal approval, it's supposed to go to everyone with 138% of the poverty level. But Utah, of course, we want to go at 100%. And we want to make sure they work in Utah. A lot of people, did you know that the participation rate in this country, the labor force participation rate, So the people of all the people that could work, age 16 and over, non-civilian population, it's only 62%. We don't get all upset that 38% of people are not working, yet when we have someone that we're thinking about giving aid to, we assume that that person should be working, better be working, can't have something until they work. That doesn't make sense. We wouldn't, I know, perhaps, I would guess, in Jenny's life with Steve, right? There's times when Jenny didn't work. There were times when I didn't work. I stayed home and raised my kids. I stepped out of the labor force, and yet I was fortunate to have health care through my husband. But if someone doesn't have that umbrella, doesn't have that case, that care, we're going to say, you can't have it unless you work. So there's a lot of this. It doesn't make sense when we talk about what we value and how we live our own lives, and we put other rules on other people. So yes, I'm for the expansion of Medicaid. Having health care is crucial to the economy in order for kids to learn, people to work, and the economy to grow.
Thank you. Mr. Waldrip.
Thank you, and I think this is something to pay attention to, because what I'm about to do right now is break with my legislative leadership and the governor and say, this is something that we need to do, and there's a few reasons for it. When you go to the hospital with insurance, you get your bill afterward, and your aspirin costs you $40, right? And then you get this, and it's everything is inflated. Now, why are these things inflated? Because the hospitals have to accept in the emergency room anybody that comes in for any reason, insurance or not. So who ends up paying that bill? You and I do, those of us who have coverage. We have a huge gap in coverage in our state, and the legislature tried to address it, and they're nervous with good reason. But there's 150,000 people that will be covered by Medicaid expansion. 22,500 children are anticipated to join the ranks of the insured as well. There's not only a huge social benefit to this, but there's also an economic benefit, and it's fairly measurable. We know that this will bring in a whole new slew of jobs into the state. It will bring in economic investment in healthcare, and it may drive down our costs a little bit. But what it won't do is drive up our costs by adding this population to the Medicare rolls. We have to do this. This is part of who we are. We care for those around us. If there's a segment of society that's uncared for and uncovered, that's what we are. We care for these people. Now, there may be a bill that comes due with this. Right now, the federal government is matching it at 90-to-1 rate. 90% they'll pay, 10% we pay. That's the 0.15% increase. It may come soon that we have to pay 20%, 30%. If that day comes, and this is what the governor and the House leadership is worried about, it's a budget buster because it's a big bill. That's the decision we're making today, and I think it's the right decision. I think that should pass, and I think that is the right decision, and we'll have to wrestle through the budget decisions just like we do on everything else. But I think to leave this segment of population uncovered is frankly not who we are, and so I support it.
So I want to ask both of you about an additional ballot initiative, the Better Boundaries Initiative. According to a poll by Dan Jones and Associates on April 2nd, 2018, nearly 50% of Utahns support independent redistricting. The Salt Lake Tribune confirmed that polling data on July 8th, 2018, noting that Utahns are in favor of a 7-member independent commission redrawing state political boundaries by a 2-to-1 margin. Do you support Proposition 4 in the upcoming election? Should the proposition not pass, what steps will you take to respond to the sentiment expressed by these polls that voters believe that Utah's political boundaries can be more effectively and perhaps more fairly drawn? Mr. Waldrip.
Thank you. This is another critical issue because it affects all of us. If you've looked at our legislative districts, it's a little interesting. It includes Ogden Valley and comes down and takes in East Ogden and comes through Ben Lomond and then winds its way over to Harrisville. It, in some respects, the city of Harrisville is intact in one sense, but in the other sense, it looks kind of goofy. I think this ballot initiative should pass. I think it's something that's on the minds of most of us. I don't, frankly, believe that it's going to have a huge impact in our redistricting efforts because it will still be controlled by the majority party. I don't think it's really going to make all of that seat change of a difference in the way things have been done, because ultimately it does go to the legislature by our state constitution to do the redistricting. But I think it will put some pressure on individuals to make sure that the decisions they're making are clear and transparent. And again, this is the same thing, clear, accountable, and transparent in government. That's what we're after. That's what I'm after. So I do think this is a good idea. I think it will help. Again, I don't think it's going to solve the world's problems, but I do think it's a step in the right direction to create an independent redistricting commission.
Ms. Froerer.
Better Boundaries Initiative number 4 is crucial to Utah's future. It's part of the reason I'm running, quite frankly, is because we get to 2018 right now, and then we're going to get to 2020, and I'm an economist, and I'm excited. We get the census data again, and that's where we start to recut the districts based on that census data, and trust me, the state has changed. It's changed in the last 10 years, and this decision about how we district it the next time, it matters. It matters for our future. It matters that we cut districts that are representative of this new demographic that we don't even know happened, but it did. So when we reached last time and cut the districts after the 2010 census, 2012, wow, we haven't had a Democrat elected in Weber County since. That was so amazingly well done by the supermajority party to make it so that we were virtually impossibly unable to get anyone elected. It's been very effective. It was a miracle. It worked. It worked really well. But it isn't a miracle for the people who are left behind and get no representation in that supermajority legislature that's only gotten more supermajority over these years. So that's why we're here tonight, because this is a slim chance that a Democrat might win. It's like, wow, I gotta run up there and see what that's about, right? Because it's been so impossible. So I am for better boundaries. I'm so much for better boundaries. Matter of fact, I didn't really want to run, except that we need Democrats in the legislature. As he said, they have the ultimate say. We need at least 1/3 of the people in that legislature by 2022 to stand a chance to represent what Utah really is. Thank you.
Great, thank you both. So both of you have indicated an interest in talking about air quality, so now we're going to do that. Over the summer, the Salt Lake Tribune reported that in addition to Utah's decade-long struggle to manage particulate matter air pollution along the Wasatch Front, portions of 7 of the state's counties were formally declared to be in violation of national standards for ozone. A host of factors already contribute to or could worsen these air quality concerns, including the population growth we've already talked about, as well as the state's continuing reliance on oil and mining industries and proposed development plans. Why do you believe you're the most qualified candidate to address this issue? What efforts would you make in the legislature to balance economic development, population growth, and environmental quality for those affected by these and other environmental challenges faced by Utahns? Ms. Froerer.
In terms of the environment, so I work with a school in downtown Ogden, and we have a machine on our building to measure air quality. I don't know how many have heard of something called purple air. But purple air is a way that you can get local data, very specific area data about air quality. Because air is very interesting. I don't know if you know, but air, like water, moves and flows, and it pools up against buildings, and then it blows on by some places. So air quality is very inconsistent. But we put this monitor right where parents pull up each day. And what we're going to do, and I have a set of students working on between Weber State and Da Vinci, my Green Dragons group, they're called, they're our environmental club, and we're designing a simple light indicator that will go from happy face, when air is good, to medium face as air gets worse, and then sad face. Mr. Purple Air will not be happy. When the parents sit there and idle, and the air quality goes bad against our building where everyone picks up every day. Now that may sound silly to you, but I believe that's the answer to getting air quality movement out of our legislatures, when I get parents to understand that what they do each day, just being normal, picking up their kids, idling for a few minutes, changes the quality of the air right where they're sitting as their little sweet kids come out the door and run through that air. It's now Mr. Unhappy Purple Air. So that's what I'm about. I think we've got to raise awareness, and that's the kind of thing I come up with sometimes, is a way to give people education, collect some data, and see what's really going on, and whether we can make a better deal out of it by helping people understand the problem.
Mr. Waldrip.
Thank you, and I think this is another important question, because it is something that is near crisis level now and is only going to get worse. We know this. I'm a big believer in the carrot rather than the stick. It's much more effective. It's more effective with my kids. I've tested it out a number of different ways. It's even more effective with my wife, although now I'm admitting it, I'm in big trouble now forever. But the carrot is always more effective than the stick. I think as a state we've taken some steps backward in our air quality legislation, because we've taken away some of the incentives for alternative development of different energies and for vehicle emissions incentives. I think we've gone a little bit backwards in that. We know a couple of statistics. The number one thing that impacts our air quality is automobiles, 45%. Okay? Number two is industry. It's only 13%. So we know where the big target is. It's in cars, right? We've talked about housing. We've talked about density. That can have an impact on our air quality. That is what we need to educate our local cities on, because it will impact our future air quality going forward. The other thing, we just had a meeting last night at the Ogden Valley Planning Commission to talk about forest management up in Ogden Valley. There's a lot of areas where we just had the Pole Creek fire where they let the fire burn and they didn't have any access to fight the fire. So we're going to change that, which I think is a very good thing at the state level. We have to think differently. We have to acknowledge the reality of the fact that our air quality is going to be bad. We tried in Weaver County, I think last winter, to ban wood-burning stoves. There was a near riot of wood-burning stove users down at the county building. People are very passionate about not being told what to do or what not to do, but they respond much better when you dangle a carrot in front of them and say, look, if you do this good behavior, we're going to reward you. That's the direction I think we need to go in the legislature with air quality.
Excellent, thank you. This fall, if you'd like, please.
I just want to point out that we're in agreement that it's a very crucial issue. And I want to point out that I had a solution, right? He said we've got to make people more aware. We've got to raise awareness. And a very simple thing like a light indicator and some data can make a huge difference in a hurry. And these are things, when I go to the legislature, we can work together. And we can make this happen by getting schools so that this air quality data is available. Students take their hand by it and take control of it, start pushing it with their parents. Man, that's a great way to get something done. And furthermore, I'm just going to say my group of students is working very hard to get Ogden to be an idle-free city. They've been working to approach the city council and make those efforts. So a lot of times, a trick might be is to work from the constituents up. And that's what I've been spending my life doing, is working with constituents.
Oh, sure. Thank you. I think there's something critical here we need to note is, yeah, we agree on the issue. It is an issue. We need solutions. We need someone to go down to the legislature, propose solutions, be there, push solutions, and make these things happen. That's what I plan to do.
All right, let's talk about tax policy for a moment. This fall, Utah voters will consider two different ballot measures that will impact the tax burden faced by consumers. The 0.15% increase to sales tax to fund full Medicaid expansion, and potentially up to a 10% per gallon tax to offset the cost of the Our Schools Now initiative compromise that Governor Herbert recently came out in support of. Do you believe that Utah can continue to develop its economy and fulfill its fiscal responsibilities without a broader effort to reform its tax and revenue structure? More specifically, do you believe that the fiscal burden of Medicaid and school funding and other government services should be shouldered via consumer tax, or do you believe that Utah should consider reformulating its property and income tax schemes? Mr. Waldrip.
Thank you. You just walked into my yard, Mike, so thank you very much. I'm a tax attorney. That's what I study. That's what I understand. I know the lingo. I know the language. For 40 years, we haven't had a significant reform of our state tax code. 40 years, we've allowed things to happen and build up, and we haven't taken a look at them. There's a principle in the law that's called the but-for test. But-for test says that, but for this, what would happen? You go to a grocery store, you slip off a banana peel. But for that banana peel being there, you would not have slipped and fallen. We need to take this approach with all of the tax incentives that are currently in our tax code. We need to take them out, lay them on the table, and say but for. Is this incentive still viable? Do we need this? When an industry came in 40 years ago and we said, hey, this is a great idea, we're going to make money by giving them this break and incentivizing their growth, and it happened, and that was 40 years ago. Now, I have yet to meet the industry or the company that says, hey, thank you. You were so kind 40 years ago to give us this incentive. We have done so well that we no longer need it. Will you please take that away from us? We have to do that. That's our job. That's my job. That's called transparency. That's called accountability. That's called being open. We have to take that but-for approach to all of our legislation, but particularly our tax code. It's time. We're long overdue for a deep look at our tax code and our tax incentives. That will create money that we can use in education, that will create money we can use in other places, because there's money to be had there. There's low-hanging fruit there. There are other things that we're going to say, hey, this is great, we're going to keep that one because it makes financial sense for the state, for us as taxpayers, to invest in this particular industry or this tax strategy to create additional growth. But there are a lot in there that don't, and we need to take a hard look at them, and that's what I plan to do.
Ms. Froerer.
In terms of tax policy, in the primaries, I've heard Steve talk about this before, and it's traditional. It's exactly what we would expect when someone's involved with, as we called it before, the money, the machine, and the monarchy. Because the reality is, he talks about which tax policy is he talking about when he says rewriting the tax code. What are we talking about? Which level of tax? Which type of tax? It's the income tax. It's going to be the income tax that he focuses upon in this role if he would get elected, because that's where the big question is, right? Income tax in the state gets a lot of attention in this respect, but it's a three-legged stool of taxation in Utah. We have the sales tax, we have property tax, and we have income tax. Now, if you don't want to pay sales tax, you go up to Oregon, right? You don't have to pay it. You move to Nevada so you don't have income tax. But here in Utah, we figured out a fiscally sound state without someplace else to push all that tax burden off to, like tourism, to that extent that maybe Nevada can. We have the three-legged stool. And so if we rewrite income tax, that might be good, right? You're talking about working through the different tax breaks that might be out there. But once again, if you follow the money, it's the attorneys and the banking industry and the people that support Steve that would not really like that, because well, they're your higher income people. They're not going to say, oh, Steve, we're glad we gave you a lot of money. Push it. Yeah, do it, Steve. But really, the reality is, we've got to push those buttons, and we need someone who can speak to that and talk about it and do it with the heart of the bigger picture, without a person who got 65% of their money from individuals, not from special interests, especially tied to big money. So for me, when I think about tax policy, I'm especially disappointed in the fact that they put education on a gas tax, that they put healthcare on a sales tax. The people that are least able to make the expenditure are being asked to put it on their shoulders. So I'm not in favor of that.
Amen.
Do you want to clarify?
Please, thank you. Income tax is one component. There's a ton of taxes out there. There's a ton of structures out there. We need to look at it all. We have other issues with our taxes, right? We have sales tax that, in some respects, disproportionately impacts the poor. When we talk about our sales tax on food that are proposed, I think that's good tax policy. We tax our retirees, double tax them actually, on their Social Security income. That's bad policy. That's not what we do. We don't double tax, but that's what we're doing. There are a number of things. I think what you'll see tonight is that I'm an ideas guy. I don't care where the idea comes from. I don't care if it comes from somebody wearing a blue shirt, a red shirt, a green shirt, a purple shirt, where you come from or where you live. We have a need for good ideas. We have a need for someone who can take these good ideas, and regardless of what comes, come what may, we need to do the right thing. And doing the right thing involves making hard choices, and I'm prepared to make those hard choices.
Ms. Froerer, would you like to follow up?
I appreciate that. In terms of the income tax, it's very important to understand how we got to where we are today. There's been a lot of what I would call this unintended consequences of government action. And specifically there, when they, back about 10 years ago, flattened Utah's tax structure, they made it closer to a flat tax, almost exactly a flat tax, which means the people at higher incomes got a tax break. And all the income tax in Utah, do you know what it goes for? Education. Every bit of the income tax in Utah goes for education. It used to be K through 12, and then they added on higher education. So they flattened the tax, which made it harder to collect enough money. They added another pot of people to be funded by it, and we wonder why we're at the lowest in the state. It was this revision of income tax policy that got us to the point that now we have to go to the gas tax to try to get enough money. We need to be forward-looking. We need to think ahead. And these unintended consequences are something I spend my day and night thinking about in the world of economics.
All right, we have one last question before we turn to your closing statements, and that addresses your approach to leadership should you be elected. No matter what your party affiliation, the nation's current political climate can objectively be described as deeply divided, or more strongly than that. A recent Pew Research Center study reported that partisan division between U.S. citizens has more than doubled since they began tracking that metric in 1994. While Utah state politics are frequently spared the rancor we witness on the national scene, my question is this: how will you be an effective legislator? Specifically, how will you build relationships within your party, across the aisle, and among constituents that will help you promote your constituents' interests if you're elected? We'll begin with this word.
I love that phrase, across the aisle, because I'll already be there. That's what we don't have in Utah, is very many people to reach to across the aisle. If you look at legislative report cards, guess who does really well in Utah legislature getting things done? Women Democrats. They have the best records, generally speaking, for getting things done because what are they there to do? Build bridges and connect people. That's been my life story. So I realize that we can talk about the fact that if elected, my opponent would be in the room, right? In the caucus where the decisions are made. But once again, I say, nothing about us without us. That is not how decisions should be made. That's how we've gotten to this point here in Utah. So I appreciate that there can be different types of leadership. And I think both Steve and I could bring types of leadership, but I think at this point in history, people are looking up and saying, wait a minute, it's not representing me. I think we need a change. So I feel I can be an effective leader. You've heard of my background. You've heard the types of things I've worked with. I don't think that there's anything I've ever had to research and I couldn't learn about. And I do know that there's a lot I don't know about the political process. I haven't been a political wonk at all. I've loved teaching. But I do believe I bring the background, the experience, to be an extremely effective leader. And I can be more effective by not being in the room, but being out there, speaking up. And I have nothing to lose. I'm not planning to go for leadership, right? There's never going to be a majority Democrat party in Utah. I know Steve has ambitions for that and would like to stay with it a little, as long as that takes. I don't have ambitions for that. 2 years, and if you want to kick me out, you go right ahead. Thank you.
Mr. Waldrip.
Thank you. I think we just heard a couple of critical things. Number one, we need a voice in the legislature. Well, you don't want to hear about it for the first time on the evening news, which is where typically the Democrats hear about what happened. We need effective leadership, and effective leadership starts with being part of the process. Part of the process, you have to be in the room. Now, I'm a pragmatic guy. It could be better, it could be different, but it's not. So when you vote, when you consider your vote, consider the fact that one of us will be in that room. One of us will be pushing the ideas and concerns that you have and that we've talked about tonight. One of us won't. One of us will be outside. Effective leadership means being a part of the process. Effective leadership means taking your voice to the legislature. I think I've demonstrated tonight that I'm not standing on any party platform or kowtowing to anybody's agenda. I want to do the right thing. I want to listen to you. I want to hear your concerns. I think as I've walked around, I've learned those concerns. I think we have a good idea of what we need to work on. Education. We have to focus on that. That is where our future lies. Teachers. We have to focus on that. That's where our future lies. We have to focus on these things that will make a difference in the future, and we have to make those hard decisions now. And I'm the guy that will make those decisions. I am the guy that will be there to make those things happen. That will be your representation. That will be your representative making those decisions and listening to you as we make those decisions. If I do something you guys wouldn't agree with, I hope you call me. I hope you call me on it and say, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen anybody do. And I'll say, why? And then you'll tell me. And I may disagree with you, I may agree with you. We'll have a good discussion. That's what I bring to this position. That's what I bring to this race, is somebody who will be there, who will listen, and who will make effective policy decisions that will positively impact our lives.
Thank you. So we've arrived at the portion of the debate where you get to offer your closing remarks. And for those, Ms. Froerer will begin.
I want to thank you all again for being here this evening. I don't know exactly where this will go. We know that a Democrat getting elected in Weber County doesn't happen. So we're going to remain hopeful. And all these people here in shirts have been incredibly, amazingly helpful to me. I've had hundreds of volunteers, hundreds. I have had 162 donors. Steve's had 1/3 of that. I've had people reach out to me in all sorts of different ways at the door, and I've knocked over close to 2,000 doors now, right? And I've talked to people one after another, and there's young people and there's old people, and they're going like, wow, no one's ever come to our door before. That's kind of one of the reactions, because I wasn't able to work this district very much last time when I ran for Senate. But I really believe that there is a point in time where we are now, where this type of leadership that I would like to offer is what people are looking for. And there's been some things tonight. I have great respect for Steve and his family, and our kids have raised together. But there's just implicit things that are very hard that people don't get. And when he's talked about being on the inside, and he talked about all those different colored shirts, who were wearing those shirts? Did you catch that? The guys in the shirts. We've got a lot of guys in that legislature, people. Let's give a woman a chance. Not because I'm a woman, but I also bring such an incredible background and passion for what I would like to do to help people. So, as you go home tonight, I just want to thank you again for giving up baseball and giving up Hulu and giving up Netflix and spending some time with us. But I also want you to think about our future and think about what an economist might do, because they see the big picture that could help. And there'll still be a majority of Republicans, I promise. But at the end of the day, I think I'm the best candidate, and I put heart and soul into this, and I hope at the end of the day that if I get elected, you will trust me and come to me, and we will work this out together. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for these incredible questions, and for the staff at the ABU for running this and putting it on Facebook Live. Hopefully there's at least 3 people watching. And you're tracking that right now, aren't you? I appreciate all of you for being here tonight. This is a level of civic engagement that is becoming increasingly rare, and I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. I think what you've seen tonight, we're not that different. We have some different ideas, but we share the same values. I think most of the people in this room, you would say, we share the same values. Our values are very common to all of us. You go down the street, what are your top 3 priorities? Education is going to be one of them. We have to work and try and push to give our children the best opportunity they can possibly have. And the research is clear. The research says you either get good families or you get good teachers. We only have one that we can do in the legislature, and that is investing in good teachers to invest in our children. When we talk about First Amendment rights and campaign donations, I appreciate that topic coming up, and that's been brought up several times. I just want you to understand that we believe in the First Amendment. We believe people can support who they support. They choose who they support based on shared values and common beliefs. You know what Ms. Froerer won't tell you is that $21,000 of her $27,000 came from outside of our district. So think about that when you think about special interests. Now, no matter which one of us you choose, you're going to end up with a great representative. I've known Deana. I've known her husband. I've known her kids for a long time. Her support staff, they're incredible. These are great people. However, only one of us, and we've touched on it over and over again, only one of us will be able to give you an effective voice in the legislature today, tomorrow, and into the future, for as long as my wife allows me to do this, which the jury's still out on that one. We have an opportunity to get an effective voice in the legislature, not because of anything I am, but because I listen. Because my background and experience, my background serving on the Ogden Valley Planning Commission, on the Ogden Valley Land Trust, Pine View Advisory Committee, doing the parks, doing all these things in the community, on the United Way Board. These are the things I do. This is where I live. It's not based on ideology. It's based on common sense. It's based on your common sense, our shared common sense. This is where we live. I will be the person at the legislature that takes your voice and amplifies it, that takes our issues and amplifies it, and creates solutions that will work for all of us. Thank you for being here tonight.
That concludes tonight's debate. Please join me once again in thanking the candidates, Democrat Deana Froerer and Republican Steve Waldrip. tonight's debate. Of course, thank you to all of you for coming out. When voter participation is at an all-time low, it's great to see people come out for events like these. We hope you'll take the next step and go vote for the candidate of your choice. And if you're still deciding, stick around and talk with both of them before you take off. Thanks for being here and have a safe night.